Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is David Young and I'm a computer science student at Concordia, Chicago. And this is part one of a new series called Agile with Scrum, Building BudgetBuddy. In this series, we're going to take a look at the Agile methodology and the Scrum methodology, and then we're going to apply those to a hypothetical example called BudgetBuddy to take a look at what it might look like to manage a project with Agile and Scrum. In this episode, we're going to cover an introduction to the Agile methodology and a history of project management methodologies for software engineering. And we're going to take a look at the Agile methodology in the words of its creators by looking at the Agile Manifesto. In part two, we're going to take a look at the Scrum framework. So Scrum is a sub-methodology of Agile. And we're going to look at some real-world examples of companies that have implemented Agile practices to improve their project management. Then finally, in part three, we're going to take a look at an Agile implementation plan for our hypothetical BudgetBuddy personal finance app. And then we're going to wrap up by taking a look at the benefits of Agile over other project management methodologies. So I want you to imagine for a second that you're managing a finance app project where the requirements change every week. It's imperative that you can effectively meet the customer's expectations and desires for the app. How can you manage this project well? Let's take a look at some options. What we'll call the old way is the waterfall method, and it relies on project methodologies used during World War II for like military development and things like that. So to develop weapons and vehicles and things like that for the war. And in 1970, Dr. Royce codified this and sort of put into writing for the first time what we call the waterfall method of software engineering. And it's a plan-driven methodology. So customer involvement is going to be restricted to the start during the requirements definition stage. A plan is going to be developed, and then the team is going to follow that plan to get the working software. And you can see it's called the waterfall method because we go down and we don't go back up. So we start with the requirements definition, figuring out what do we want the app to do, and how is it going to do it. Then we're going to go on. Once that phase is complete, we're not going to go back to it. We're going to completely wrap up this requirements definition phase and then go to the system and software design phase. Design what does the system look like, wrap that up completely, and then go down to implementation and unit testing. So writing code and then testing each of the parts of our code. And then we're going to wrap that up completely and move down to integration and system testing, putting it all together and making sure it works. And then finally to operation and maintenance. And so you can see the project proceeds in distinct stages without returning to completed phases. And a core feature of the waterfall method is rigorous documentation, especially in these two sections. It's really, really important in the waterfall method that you have a good, strong plan to coordinate everything and make sure that everything goes according to specification. And so it's notorious for a lot of documentation and sort of things that aren't code that are surrounding the process. Well, some software engineers weren't too pleased with that. And in the 1980s, this sort of new model of incremental development emerged, where the software is going to be developed in small increments. So rather than proceeding in these distinct stages and then only arriving at some working software right at the very end, specification, development, and validation are interleaved in the incremental methodology. And so you can see here, at the start, we're going to define the outline requirements, get the big picture of what we want our software to do. Then we're going to break it up into increments. So we're going to take a look at, we're going to break the software up into some increments and say, hey, what am I going to develop and when? Then we're going to design the system architecture. So taking a look at the overarching model for the system. And then finally, we're going to start developing our system increments. So one at a time, we're going to go through these increments that we identified. And we're going to write the code for that increment. We're going to validate that increment. We're going to do testing and make sure everything works. Then we're going to integrate it into our system, so what we already have, and test the whole system, making sure everything works together properly. And then we're going to deploy the increment. So we can put this in the hands of customers or users. And so after that, we'll go up and we'll develop the next increment. And what this is going to allow us to do is involve customers throughout the process. So rather than just involving them at the requirements stage and getting the plan onto paper, we can involve them in each increment, and we can deploy the increment to customers at the end and see what they think of it and get feedback from them. And a key part of the incremental model is that the core features are going to be developed first so that incomplete versions can be deployed for use and feedback. So customers can get their hands on an early alpha or beta version of the product and give the developers feedback. And this may involve prototyping. So like we talked about, putting things in the hands of users. And so what this is going to do is it's going to address the lack of customer involvement and the rigidity, some of the rigidity of the waterfall method, but it's not the best we can do. And in 2001, some software engineers got together and they decided that they wanted to do things better. And so they wanted to address some inefficiencies in the existing paradigms. And so they got together to develop the Agile methodology. And so Agile is an iterative cyclical process of software development. So it kind of is drawing on that incremental stuff that we just talked about. So the product can be deployed before it's finalized. So you can have an alpha and a beta version in the hands of users. But another big focus of Agile is minimizing overhead. So what this means is that spending less time doing things that aren't building working software. So to do that, face-to-face communication rather than sending and waiting on emails and things like that is key. And minimal documentation is key. So not no documentation, but minimizing the amount of time, like we said, that's spent not coding. Another key value for Agile is flexibility and responsiveness. So rather than the rigidity of the waterfall method, where you have to develop a plan and stick to it, the Agile method is designed to adapt and change based on evolving needs of the project. And it spawned numerous sub-methodologies. Scrum and Kanban are two examples. And we're going to talk more about Scrum later on. This is the group of software engineers meeting to go over and design and develop Agile methodology. So let's take a look at how Agile solves some problems that existed with the traditional models. So the upfront planning in traditional models is rigorous, which leads to limited adaptability. Like we said, you have to stick to the plan that you established. There's no going back and changing the plan as you go on. Whereas with Agile, plans are flexible, evolving as time goes on, and the project is better understood. So what this means for our BudgetBuddy example is that rather than at the very start of the project figuring out what the customer wants, and then setting that in stone, we're going to be able to better conform BudgetBuddy to the needs of users and customers. Customer involvement in the traditional models is limited. It's only at the start. But in BudgetBuddy, the customer is integral in all stages of development. So what this means is that the company that we're developing this app for is going to get to have their eye on and their hands involved in the development of this product so that it's going to conform better to their specifications. And you can see that in traditional models, as we talked about, the product can only be delivered once the development is complete because all of the integration and validation happens at the end. But with the Agile method, the customer can utilize incomplete versions of the product earlier in development. And so for our BudgetBuddy application, this means that the customer can get their hands on the personal finance management app and test it out and maybe even deploy it to users in that alpha or beta version like we talked about and get some feedback. So let's take a look at Agile in the words of its creators by looking at the Agile Manifesto. So let's look at some core Agile values. The Agile Manifesto reads, "We are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others to do it. Through this work, we have come to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools." As we talked about, rather than rigidity and formulaicness, the Agile methodology emphasizes collaboration and teamwork rather than simply following a process and breaking everything down into that process and sticking to the plan. values working software over comprehensive documentation. So for our BudgetBuddy app, this is going to mean we're rather than writing extensive plans and focusing on having a lot of documentation, we're going to dive right in and get into coding software and putting it in the customer's hands so that BudgetBuddy can be given some feedback and improved upon. Customer collaboration is valued over contract negotiation. So it's not about just getting the job and doing the bare minimum. Agile emphasizes doing your best to meet the customer's needs. And so for BudgetBuddy, this means constantly reviewing and looking at the app and making sure that as the user's needs may change or evolve, so does the app. And then finally, Agile emphasizes responding to change over following a plan, as we talked about. It's not about the rigidity. It's about being able to be flexible and to adapt the product to changing user needs. Thank you for watching this first video in our series. Up next, we're going to talk about the Scrum framework, which is a sub-methodology of Agile. And we're going to look at some real-world examples of companies that have implemented Agile. I want to give a special thanks to Dr. Victor Govindaswamy for his invaluable insight and mentorship. This video series wouldn't be possible without him. And I want to give a shout-out to Concordia University, Chicago. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. And if you have any questions, please leave a comment and I'll try and get back to you. Thank you.